I've been asked to sing a song to gather your attention. This is my killifish identification song. Eight rays in the dorsal fin means a lot, especially if the dorsal fin has a spot. The bands are not black, the stripes are not silver, and if it's got a blunt nose and looks kind of foggy, then you know you've got a mama choggy. And with that, I wrote that. All right, so I would like to introduce our plenary speaker, Alex Hackman, who is a restoration ecologist with Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. Usually we are in hard hats and orange vests, but today we're spiffed up, and he's going to be presenting about restoring your wetlands for ecological dynamism.
Thank you. Talk about a difficult act to follow. I'm going to have to do an interpretive dance or something to get started. Like Bill earlier, I don't do a lot of speaking at a podium or with a microphone, so I'm blessed with a loud voice, so if I start to blow anyone over with it, just give me some earmuffs maybe, and I'll try to tone it down a little bit.
But Alex,
yes?
those of us who are deaf and hard of hearing already missed half of what you said.
All right, well then I'll bring it in like that. Is that better? Okay. Okay, thank you. Folks, this is a treat for me to be with you today, to be with so many friends and friendly faces. So thank you for having me. When my friend Alex Mansfield called me last fall to invite me to do this talk, he said, hey man, you can talk about anything. You just need to make it entertaining. And so I had to think really hard about the acceptance, and then 2 seconds later I said, well, of course. Of course, it'd be my honor and privilege to come and speak before you all, so thank you very much. In the time since that invitation came in, I've thought about other reasons why I'm pleased to be before you, and I think there are three that I'd like to lift up to you to begin. The first is in the title of my talk. I have ulterior motives. I want your help restoring our regional wetlands. And I want to talk to you about doing that in a way that repairs these beautiful, complex, and adaptive systems to be just that. And so what I'm going to focus on in much of my talk today is a restoration approach that encourages ecosystem dynamism. The next reason I said yes was to salute all of you. This is a room full of eco-warriors. I have so much respect and admiration for so many of you and the things you're doing, you have done, that you're doing now, and that you are going to do. So thank you for your hard work for Mother Nature. Needed now more than ever. And the third reason I said yes was to be part of this conversation with you all today, this very important conversation about our water challenges. And to me, these are some of the main ones that come to mind, including in the lower left-hand corner, an unbalanced relationship, I would say, between humans and the landscape in parts of our state, resulting in over-extraction of water, turning beautiful rivers into hiking trails at times, for example. In the upper right-hand corner, we have a chronic nutrient enrichment problem, other pollutants we're also worried about. We also have waterways clogged with aging infrastructure that result in other kinds of risks. And then, I think the elephant in the room is climate change and sea level rise. We didn't spend a lot of time on sea level rise this morning. To me, this is the issue that really provokes the need for some thinking and advanced planning about our relationship with the coastline and our future along it. Very important stuff. Just by way of introduction, again, I work for the Division of Ecological Restoration. I actually work for you. I'm a public servant, extremely grateful to have the opportunities to work in Massachusetts on rivers and wetlands. I want to acknowledge two of my colleagues who are in the room today. DER Director Beth Lambert is here somewhere taking pictures. Hi, Beth. And I also want to acknowledge stream ecologist extraordinaire Kate Benson, who's here as well. So these are the kind of projects that we do with local communities. And what I want to emphasize in this slide is that we're action-oriented. Our work is successful when projects get done and change happens on the ground. And the second thing I want to emphasize is the partnership-based approach. I mean, these are all partnership projects. We don't do projects without local communities and visions and dreams of what's possible. So, of course, this is why I also wanted to come before you and talk today, because I want to work with you. So, this is my hope for what you leave the talk with today and what I hope to convey in my time with you. Number one is a good definition of restoration ecology, ecological restoration. What is it? The second is a simple recipe for doing it well. I'm going to give you a 5-step recipe for doing it anywhere. The third is concrete opportunities to do these things in your own backyard. And if I'm successful, you'll be able to use the first two as a new set of lenses to examine your own landscapes for new and different types of opportunities beyond what I mentioned to you. And then the fourth is hope and energy for action, which I think we could all use some of today. So I want to begin by zooming out and just covering some context. You know, we, as human societies, we've always had water challenges. This is nothing new. Locally, we've had severe water challenges. Boston Harbor was once one of the most polluted water bodies in the entire country, as many of you in this room remember. But what this example shows us is that with good legislation, political will, resources, and the right idea for how to solve a problem, we can do that. Here, of course, putting the sewer outfall 9 miles offshore and not discharging directly into the harbor. So today I get to do this. You know, this is me in my little boat launched from Winthrop Harbor, and I'm fishing there right under the airport, and planes are flying overhead. And here I get this, because several decades later, that problem is fixed. There's now an opportunity for me to catch flounder and striped bass and bluefish. Unfortunately, I'm severely limited by my poor fishing ability, so that would not actually happen. And also, regrettably, this is the end of our conversation about kayak fishing for today, but I welcome any advice later today from any of you about how to actually get a fish on the end of my line there. And I think this is a theme I want to carry through the day then, and this is the case with Boston Harbor, that if we address the root cause of degradation, here, of course, the sewer outfall, then we see this incredible ability of natural systems to rejuvenate. You know, nature is not weak, nature is strong. But things feel a little bit different now, you know, and to me it boils down to really these three things: the scale and severity and the pace of issues that are cropping up. There's been mention already today of the IPCC report that came out in October. We hear statements like this out of the co-chair of that committee: the next few years are probably the most important in human history. I mean, that is scary stuff. You know, we have 10 years to decarbonize or face the wrath of Mother Nature in ways we can hardly even imagine right now. You know, this is very dire stuff. Every few months we see things like this. Those of you that, I think everyone in this room is a nature lover. I will speak for all of you. I certainly am. And these kind of things, when they come out, you know, they're very painful. You know, this one in particular really hurt me deeply. You know, this is the base of the food web, these beautiful creatures. New York Times front page of the magazine section, you know, this really hurts deep. And it seems with increasing frequency, we're hearing things like this. And so to me, it actually feels like this. It's this new, gigantic threat, the likes of which we've never seen before, that's obvious. And on top of that feeling, we have an administration in Washington that takes that kind of position. When I was at my deepest moment of despair last fall, my friend Beth Lambert sent me a copy of this, an article describing this new condition called ecological grief. And, I have this, and I think many of you at times when we see news like this and repeated news like this, it's really easy to despair. And people are studying this now, so maybe I'll be a subject for it someday, but we are tough New Englanders here. We do not need to wallow in grief. We have agency to act. And for me, it's been things like this that have pulled me out of that situation of grief and gotten me back into action land. Young people rising up, protesting about inaction on climate change. These are very hopeful things that are happening right now. And as other speakers have talked about today, we live in a state that acknowledges that climate change is real. Great. And we have this state-of-the-art document to help begin to guide our way through some of the challenges that we are going to face. We have leadership that also acknowledges that it's a real problem and is doing creative things to try to secure new resources to bring to bear on these issues. And as you heard from numerous speakers as well, we have structures and processes now in place to try to deliver some of those new resources to local communities to take on the ground action to address the risks of climate change. So these are all very good things. And prior speakers didn't say it directly, but I'm going to say it directly. If your town's not certified, work to get that done. This is very important. There's a lot of money coming down the pipeline right now for exactly what I'm going to talk to you about and other good things. Please try to get that done locally. That is a clear action that we all in this room can take. So we have resources coming. We're tough New Englanders. We don't want to wallow in grief. The question is, what are we going to do? How to prepare our communities and our natural systems for the future. So I'm going to make this first assertion to you, is that river and wetland restoration, done right, helps address current and future water challenges. Okay? Surprise, surprise coming from me, right? The second assertion I want to make to you is that you can make miracles happen. And I know this because I've seen them. And I'm going to show you what some of those look like next. Here's an example. Here's my first miracle story to share with you. This is one of the first projects I worked on in the town of Plymouth. Nice old historic dam. Obviously this is looking upstream, it's flowing toward me. Complete barrier to fish passage, but pretty dam. The next slide I'm going to show you is standing on top of that dam, looking upstream. So here we are now. We're on top of that dam on a forest road, just looking up into the little pond it forms. If you came through here on a nice Saturday hike or something, you might not even see that dam. And you'd look to your right and you'd say, oh, that's this nice little pond. This is just a natural feature. I want you to keep your eye on that point. So we worked with the town of Plymouth for multiple years, and we did a project, and it did that. Hardly a little pond. This is actually a river valley. There's where that prior point was. So people have talked today about dam removal and floodwater storage. The last slide I showed you was a full pond. This is all submerged. There's no storage of floodwater there. This is now 15 feet lower. That's all room to store water. Now, I told you I was going to talk about miracles. So on this day, when I took this picture, I walked down off the old dam and I got in the river channel there in my sneakers, it was warm enough. And I'm sitting there watching the muddy water flowing through my legs. And I look a little bit ahead of me and I start to see this little thing coming toward me. And I'm sitting there and an eel swam upstream between my legs through the chocolate water. And that dam had been, now eels can make it through there, but other fish, that had been 200 years since a fish could swim up here. That to me was one of the first miracles I experienced through thoughtful river restoration. Now, some of you in the room might say, well, see, that's a great miracle, Alex, but looks like you set a bomb off here. That doesn't look very good. That's what you're going to talk to me about today. Well, I came back a year later, it looks just like that. And so we talk about nature having the ability for rejuvenation if you give it a chance. Here's just one example. This restored river now has springs emerging, has gravel in the bottom, has trout in it. That's a pretty far cry from that warm, stagnant pond I showed you that's disconnected. So here's the one example which I consider a miracle. Second example, I had the great fortune of seeing this site thanks to Sarah Grady. And she opened my eyes to what a cranberry farm looks like many decades after it's retired. Or I should say what some cranberry farms can look like many decades after retirement. You might not ever know that was an old cranberry farm in that picture, but that is. And if you wonder how long it's been since it was farmed last, just look at that uniform age class of trees there and date one of those trees. That's when that farm was retired. And you know, as you can all see there, that's not very much of a wetland anymore. Maybe in the ditch it is, the soil, that's about what the soil was like. And so I got this lens, thanks to Sarah, that this is the trajectory of change on some of these lands upon retirement from farming. Years later then, I got to work with landowners who wanted to try to move their land into a different place, to get back to some of the historic wetland conditions that existed before. Gloriana Davenport, my great friend, is sitting in the back there, and I had the great pleasure of working with her for 7 years on a project to try to do that, talking almost daily, I feel like. You're family to me now. And so we did a project. And within 1 year of the earth moving equipment leaving the site, it looked like that. Literally, that was a mud flat, and that picture is taken 1 year later. Now, we've heard about nature-based solutions today. We've heard about floodwater storage, carbon sequestration, water purification. I think that some of that's going on there. So that kind of rejuvenation feels like a miracle to me. I've seen other cranberry bogs that we've worked on 7 years later, where Atlantic white cedar swamp is beginning to come back literally from the dead. This was farmed for 100 years, had several feet of sand on it, had no Atlantic white cedar trees, and today there is a little baby Atlantic white cedar swamp being reborn there that looks like this. Now, some of you might say, well, look, those trees can tolerate any condition. No wonder those trees are growing. And I would say to you, look, if I died and you tousled me around a bit and I came back to life as a healthier version of what I was in the past, wouldn't that be on every front page and every paper around the world as a miracle? Sites like this also, when you go out into the middle of a restored wetland, this is where the real magic happens. And these are some close-up pictures of that site. The sphagnum moss that's come back there, over 12 species of sphagnum moss have reappeared on this site. There are rare plants. There are, this is magic to me. These were all, none of this was seeded. None of this was planted. It's just reincarnation of the old wetland. So to me, that's a miracle. To get to that point of rejuvenation, I want to talk next about how to get to that kind of outcome on a restoration project. And, to me, it starts with a good definition of what you're trying to do, what you think about as restoration. That term is being used to describe a lot of different things today. So to me, it's very important to define upfront what you mean by it. So the favorite definition of mine comes from the Society for Ecological Restoration. There is a New England chapter upon which I sit on the board of directors, so of course I'm going to encourage you all to join. But this is the definition. The process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that's been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. So there's so much to unpack. We could spend an hour talking about this definition. I want to just point out a few key words here. It's a process. This is not a landscaping job where you go in, plant some plants, and then it's a green lawn and it looks beautiful. It's a relationship with nature to try to move the needle on its health. It takes time. It's a process. The next word is ecosystem. This is about the whole system. the relationship of the physical to the biological. It's not about one compartment of the system or one species within the system. It's about the whole engine of the system. And then lastly, this is a really interesting phrase to me, assisting in the recovery. You know, to me, this makes me think about perhaps a doctor assisting in the recovery of a human being. You know, but what does that mean for nature? So I'm going to assert to you that if we're going to play doctor in nature and try to assist in recovery, as practitioners, we need to have an understanding of how the whole system works. I don't really know how else you can diagnose symptoms or causes or prescribe cures unless we're able to articulate even something simple about how nature works. And so with humility, because none of us really know how nature works, I'm going to give you a simple conceptual model for how I think nature works. And I'm going to offer this as a guidepost for your own thinking then as we move into talking more about restoration. Okay? Ready? So with humility now, here's a 3-box model for how nature works. Ready? Okay. This is big picture too, right? So here's how we go. At any point in the land, place yourself anywhere on the planet. Wherever you're standing at that very time. You look down, you look around, there are certain underlying characteristics of any place on the planet, whether it's the slope of the land, the aspect, the underlying geology, the climate. These all set what's possible. They all set the canvas or the template of what could emerge on top of that. Over time, on that canvas rise what I'm going to call ecological processes. These are rates. This is how energy and material moves around the land. And an example of this, let's think about rainfall as an example. So the underlying control is climate, so we're raining. We're raining on our point on the land. And now let's just unpack what processes occur as a result of that. There's a rate of infiltration of rainfall going into the ground. There's a rate of surface runoff as the water runs over the land. Over thousands of years, there's a rate of erosion. There's carving of stream channels. There's transport of sediment to the coast. There's transport of organic matter around. We're moving energy and materials around through physical rates. In an ecosystem, these physical processes lead to the development of biological processes, reproduction, decomposition. And this then is an ecosystem. It's the relationship between the living and the non-living, the physical drivers, the biological responses. It's the engine for nature. And it's happening all the time in complex ways. At any point in time, if you stop the engine and you take a snapshot of what's in front of you, that's the characteristics of the ecosystem. Here I am, I'm in a room, it's a wood floor, we have trees going around us, there's a pond, you know, I can describe the characteristics of what's around me, but it's at a moment. And it's a product of that engine that's going on all the time. So there it is, 3 boxes, guys, nature, how nature works. You got that? We cool? Okay. So, as I said, the reason I think something like this is important is, even if it's not entirely accurate, is because you have to assert, I think, how you think nature works if you want to try to fix it. So this is how it works to me. This works for me. So we start to think about how to repair the land from impacts, human impacts, or stress, we'll say. And, you know, I showed you a picture before of a dam and its removal. Well, let's just think about how that affects things like I just talked about, the physical movement of water, the physical movement of sediment, of leaves that fuel the food web. Stress from humans can directly interrupt the engine, can gum it up. Stress can also occur to the other parts of this model. You know, for example, now we know, unfortunately, that we have this profound ability to affect those underlying controls. Climate, we're obviously changing. That's going to shift this whole thing. And of course, the top box can also be changed. You can go to a wetland with your excavators and pave it and put up a shopping mall, and overnight you've changed the characteristics of it without messing up the engine at all. That's not very good either. So what I'm going to assert to you is that this is the place for intervention. That if we're able to do smart restoration, we can minimize our stress on these fundamental ecological processes. We can't eliminate those stress, but we can minimize it or reduce it, thus giving the entire system a chance to straighten itself out. If that middle box is functioning intact as an engine, that helps the land sort itself out. Okay? And I'm not alone in thinking this. There's a whole discipline in restoration called process-based restoration. If any of you are interested in learning more about this is a paper I strongly recommend reading. It's very formative for me in my own thinking. Came out in 2010. It's available as a PDF online for free. So, but I'm not a theorist or a research scientist. I'm a practitioner. So I have to put that into practice to get projects done and designed accurately. And so over the last decade, we've come up with a simple 5-step recipe that builds on that definition I shared with you and builds on that conceptual model of how nature works. So what I'm going to give you now is a 5-step process to use that lens to think about restoration. We call it a practical restoration framework, process-based. Here it goes. Step 1, wherever you're working, you need to understand the land. Every place is different, and when we are considering interventions to try to repair the health of the land, if you don't understand the land, you run the risk of doing things that run counter to its health. You want to work with it and not against it over time. Number 2, focus on the key processes that govern the health of that land over time. And for us, it's the physical drivers of habitat formation and maintenance. Number 3, identify limiting factors to those processes. So what is gumming up the engine? What's interrupting those from functioning properly? Number 4, stress relief. Take away that stress. And then number 5, turn the keys over to Mother Nature and give it time. Okay? Get to know the land, assert what you care about for key ecological processes, figure out what's impairing it, relieve stress, and then give it time. That sounds pretty simple. So what I want to now do is walk you through an example of applying that. And why don't we just pick the biggest freshwater restoration project that's ever happened in Massachusetts? Okay, so I'm going to use that same 5-step simple recipe and show you how we use that at Tidmarsh Farms. And it is shown in this photo. It's a 600-acre former commercial cranberry farm that underwent a significant ecological restoration effort. And literally, that was the recipe that we used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through it one line at a time and highlight the one that I'm on and tell you how we thought about that, right? So, step 1, understand the site. Well, we're a mile from the ocean, got a generally nice intact forested perimeter, got a lot of groundwater coming up through the site. This is what it looked like the first day I met Gloriana in 2010. I took these pictures on that day. The cranberry farm, just soon after retirement. Ditches, berms, dams, straightened channels, pine trees growing up in places that had been retired for longer, okay? Monoculture, managed for monoculture for decades and decades. But it wasn't always. Look at this. When we started to get to know the site, this is a map from 1830. It was a forest, it was forested. It had a big pond in the middle. It was called Beaver Dam Pond. And that brook is called Beaver Dam Brook. That's the farm, that outline. When we got into a little more poking and prodding of the site, dug test pits and stuff like that, we found old tree stumps underground too. And as you can see from that wide grin on my face, that's the grin of starting to put it together. Okay, this is an old forested swamp. The changing size of the pond we see is related to beaver activity. It's called Beaver Dam Brook. Give me a break. It's flat as a pancake. Okay, we did a lot of stuff to get to know the site. Measured the depth of the underlying peat, thought about the relationship with groundwater, got to know the pH, what lives there, on and on and on. We really had a good handle on what was going on the land, I think. Oops. Step 2, focus on key ecological processes. Look, it boils down to this. In a river or a wetland, the things you care about are the movement of water and then sediment, organisms, organic matter, but it all boils down to water. And if you want to do a wetland restoration on a landscape that's dry, you got to help the land hold it again. So that's what we boiled it down to. Our goal was to think about the natural movement and storage of water. We next sought to understand the legacy impacts of farming that affected the natural movement and storage of water. And I'll highlight the main ones for you now. On the left-hand side is my good buddy Nick Nelson from Interfluve. And he's taking soil samples from the dark layer. You guys see that dark layer? That's the native wetland soil. That's the peat that was on this land before the farming. That 2 feet of sand on top of that peat was applied over 100+ years of farming. That's what you do in cranberry farming. You put down a little sand each year. You know, if you did the math, that would add up to something like 10 feet, but it gets highly compacted and very heavy and very dense. And that completely changes the water storage situation on the top of that site. Completely changes how water infiltrates. And that's became the primary thing we tried to address through the project. There are other things too that affected the movement and storage of water on this site, like ditches and dams and berms and so forth. But really, I want you to remember that picture of the sand layer, because that's really the primary stressor on these types of sites that result in these drier communities over time, and not just a return to wetlands. Next thing we did is figure out what to do about it. So we couldn't remove all the sand because it's too expensive. So we had to come up with a package of restoration actions to try to saturate the sand layer, get the water table to come up a little bit, and help the land hold the water. Okay, so this is one such example of that in action. This is mechanically breaking up the cranberry mat to try to allow springs that wanted to come up from the ground to express on the platform of the bog. And we thought that would work. We'd done a lot of thinking about the location of peat and where groundwater was emerging, and we targeted this kind of action for that location on that day. I was there to witness this. So we did that. And then we got pretty immediate results. That's what that same area looked like then, a few weeks later. That was pretty good. That's making it wet again, and that land is now holding the water. So that's good. That's just one example. We put all of what we were going to do into this table. This is the restoration plan. This is not a 500-page document. This is our plan for action. And I'm not expecting you to read this, but I just want to convey that even though this is the biggest project that we've done so far in Massachusetts, it doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to be clear. And so I do want to point out the first row. So I mentioned the sand layer. This table has three columns. One is articulating the limiting factor to system recovery. Here, the first row is the sand layer that I showed you the picture of. The second column is the proposed actions. What are we going to do about it? So here we're saying fill the ditches, install these little speed bumps in the stream channel to help the water bump up, and then break apart the mat, like I just showed you. Break apart the mat to help springs express on the surface. The third column there is then what we hope to accomplish from that, our desired outcome. Increase soil moisture, increase storage of water on the site. So, like I said, this doesn't have to be complicated, but this is crisp. This gets right to the heart of the matter about what's wrong with the site and what we're going to do about it and what we hope to see as a result of those actions. If any of you are contemplating a restoration action, I might suggest, thank you, that you can do this type of thing to communicate what you want to do. The last thing is turn it over to Mother Nature and give it time. Okay, so here's what it looked like when we started. Here's what it looked like when the excavators left the site. Muddy, made a mess, scattered wood. There's what it looked like 4 months later. And that's just all native seed that was underground, buried in the farm. That's not from seeding it. That's just from the application of water and sunlight to what was there already. And there it is a couple months later. So it's on a path now. It's on a wet path. It's going to do whatever it's going to do, but it's not going to turn into a dry forest. So my third assertion is that we can boil that down even further. I gave you the 5-step recipe and the definition, and that maybe seems too complicated. Let's just boil it down even further to this. If we restore the natural movement and storage of water on the land, we help our aquatic ecosystems respond to climate change. Here's what I mean by that. Remember the simple model of how nature works? I'm asserting to you that that's that middle box. That's the engine of an aquatic ecosystem. When climate change happens, if we fix that engine, that whole thing can sort itself out. You've allowed the site to be dynamic by repairing those key processes. Okay, let's talk about where we can do this locally. You're armed with a new lens for what to do or how to think about it. Where can we do it? How about everywhere? This is a map of the active cranberry farms in Massachusetts today, 13,500 acres. Most of you know there's an economic crisis right now, unfortunately, resulting in many of these farms retiring and really difficult family decisions about what to do with it. There's the attention of our politicians on this problem right now. These lands are in transition. That's what is the reality. When you zoom into those spaces from Google Earth, you see this in much of farmland. Now, it's hard to know which way water is moving. Look at all the ditching there. We're trying to renaturalize the movement and storage of water. That is heavily altered. What's happening right now in some of these lands are transitions to things like this. And the transition shown in the lower right-hand corner is becoming particularly aggressive, I would say, lately. For me, at least, I don't think historic wetlands are the best place to see these types of things. I'd prefer to see them on buildings, personally. And I'd rather see these lands return to something like this. I think this kind of outcome gets to the heart of what we're talking about today for water challenges. And this is what's possible through restoration on these sites. We actually, at DER, have a new state program dedicated to this. Today it's a staff of 1, yours truly, with 0 resources. So, you know, we're growing, so we're starting small. But nevertheless, what we're framing this as, though, is not just the wetland restoration piece. It's a whole cycle of transition to try to work with these landowners. And I've talked to you today about restoring wetlands that are dynamic. There are roles for others in this transition, and I don't want to call those out. The first piece is protecting the land. So conservation easements, land trusts, relationships, talking about future possibilities. That's local effort. That's why I was thrilled to talk to all of you today. So we protect it, we set it up for restoration, and then there's what I consider to be icing on the cake, which is protected public open space that's managed for recreation and enjoyment. We've seen these outcomes on a number of the sites we've completed. Mass Audubon bought Tidmarsh Farms, and that's now a wildlife sanctuary. The town of Plymouth bought the other side of it. That's now public open space managed with trails that are mowed so you don't have to get ticks on your legs when you walk around. The town of Falmouth, the Coonamessett River Preserve, same thing. So these can become nature parks and assets, recreational assets in our communities. Oh, and the last part is learning. This is an emerging field. We need to learn about the outcomes and improve our practice. Organizations like Living Observatory, which Gloriana Davenport runs, are trying to bring researchers under a single umbrella to understand these things. So there's lots of opportunities for volunteering and learning here too. How about another opportunity on the land that exists everywhere? Old dams that have no use, that also pose public safety risks. They're everywhere. Here's a map of the 3,000 plus that exist in the state. We have a tool on the DER website to help local communities prioritize ones for removal by suggesting which might have the most ecological benefit. People in this room, so you can zoom in on your watershed or your reach of river and see what's going on. Here's a reach on the Jones River in Kingston. You know, I zoomed way in, but There are 5 dams shown there. There are a lot of dams on our landscape. And it used to have another one until the Jones River Watershed Association decided to do something about it. Here's the Wapping Road Dam. Here's what Pine and Alex did to it. I really thought about photoshopping Pine into that cab. And there's what it looks like today, or when it was done. And then there's what it looks like today. I mean, that's pretty good. These opportunities are everywhere. Getting close to closing now. When we restore our aquatic ecosystems to be healthy and dynamic, meaning they have the ability to adjust to future stress on their own, we get these significant benefits. We purify our water, we hold water, we maintain base flows in our streams. They don't have to be hiking trails. We store flood water. These are directly related to the challenges that we're all talking about today. And of course, these types of projects also provide these other major benefits: habitat, biodiversity, storing carbon, and the last 2 are my favorite: inspiring with beauty and harmony, and offering miracles. And it's not just the natural systems that recover through these actions. Doing this type of work makes us feel good. If I zoomed in further, you would see ear-to-ear grins on the people in these pictures, getting dirty, working with partners, and then celebrating in their communities when these things are accomplished. These really make you feel good. So I hope this talk has given you some tools. If nothing else, a definition of ecological restoration that's a good one. 5-step recipe. If you choose to boil it down into 1 step, that's fine too. And then serious opportunities that are everywhere locally. I hope that with that lens, you can also examine other opportunities to renaturalize the movement and storage of water on your land. I'm going to skip some of this, but I do want you all to talk to your local officials about getting MVP certified. That's really a takeaway action that we can all do in this room today. And then continuing to build support, as you all are doing today, for healthy rivers and wetlands. So with that, I'm going to close and say, go make your own miracles. Thank you.
All right, so now we're gonna move on to the sprinting part of the presentation. These presentations, as I mentioned at the beginning, are going to be different representatives from the Watershed Action Alliance. So within the Watershed Action Alliance, we have 11 watershed associations, and it used to be 2, now it's 3 pond associations. I think there's a representative from our newest member, the Savory Pond Conservancy. Here, maybe, yeah, in the back, great. So, and it covers 66 communities in southeastern Massachusetts, and sharing practices, sharing advice, and doing things like putting on this conference. So these are going to be automatically timed. And Neponset River Watershed Association is up first, so we get to sort of test this out here. Thank you for being our pilot. Did you make it go?
No, good.
Okay, all right. So I'd like to welcome Kerry Snyder from Neponset. Thank you. All right, so we gotta make it go now.
I'm shorter than everybody else here, so. Oh, okay. See, you're getting me behind already.
Right, there you go.
Sorry, this is my first lightning presentation, so forgive me. So I'm Kerry Snyder. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Neponset River Watershed Association. We're a member-supported organization dedicated to protecting, cleaning, and creating public access to the Neponset River. The river runs from the Neponset Reservoir in Foxborough by Gillette Stadium and runs up through the gas tank up in Dorchester. I'm not sure this is actually moving along.
See, I stopped it. All right, here we go. That should be okay, I think.
So here's a map. So It runs through 14 towns between Foxborough and Boston. There are 330,000 people living in the watershed, and about half of that depend on it for its water supply. So we have lots of priorities, but we accomplish these through advocacy, science, data collection, and education. So first, you've already heard a lot about stormwater and how building and developing sort of interrupts the natural water system. So we need to come up with ways to deal with that water. And so we've done so through storm drains, which lead to outlets at nearby water bodies, but that's going through unfiltered, and so it's picking up a lot of really gross stuff on its way, so we want to make sure that we have policies in place to protect it. We also habitat restoration is hugely important, showing here a dam removal, invasive species removal, and the daylighting of the Neponset at Gillette Stadium. When they built the new stadium, they pulled it out of a culvert and daylighted it. A critical component of our work is education and public outreach, and Nancy Filer is here from my office. She is a rock star when it comes to this, and so one of the components is going into the schools and working with fifth graders as well as high school students to really raise awareness about water conservation and stormwater pollution. One of our most successful programs is the Neponset Stormwater Partnership. We've partnered with about 10 of our 14 communities, and we work with them to sort of come up with regional solutions to stormwater and polluted runoff. We do a lot of work with them to sort of streamline some of their education and outreach for permit compliance, and it's been great. We do a lot of work around water conservation, trying to work with our towns to make sure that they have good science-based bylaws in place to restrict water use or make it more efficient. We also are trying to build climate change into all of our work. It's happening now, we're seeing it, we've had flooding, we've had drought, we've seen the gamut, and so we're really working with our towns to engage in the MVP process. About half of our towns have done so so far, or in the process of getting certified as an MVP community. We also have our Citizen Water Monitoring Network program, otherwise known as SWIMMIN. So once a month, from May to October, we test the waters at various locations. We're looking at dissolved oxygen, bacterial pollution, nutrient pollution, which is where those algae blooms come from, just to test the health of the river. When we find a problem, we do some hotspot monitoring to try to figure out if we can identify the source of that problem. And then we work with towns to figure out where the trend is going and to fix the problem. Some of our recent successes: we just finished a dam removal in Pine Tree Brook in Milton. We've been advocating for better redevelopment. We got some great changes to redevelopment in both Norwood and Canton recently. And we worked on a 319 grant in the town of Stoughton to get a rain garden put in at the Gibbons School, and that's now functioning, and it's also an educational opportunity. Our goals going forward, we want a clean, healthy, and accessible river. That's been our mission. It's going to continue to be our mission. And we're going to continue to advocate for policies that protect the river and make sure that people can use its resources. We're building climate change into all of our programs, including education, and we're just going to keep moving forward. So historically, the Neponset River was an industrial river, but it's come a really long way since then, and it's got urban and suburban resources. We just partnered with Greater Boston Trout Unlimited to highlight our cold water fisheries, so we're really excited about that. But really, the strength of our organization comes from our members. We have lots going on. There's always something for somebody to get involved in. And so we really need you to either join us or join your local watershed association if you haven't already, because we really do depend on our members. Thank you very much.
Okay, awesome job. All right, so that's an example of how it's done. Very nice. I'm glad that worked out. All right, so next, I would like to welcome up Samantha Woods, who is the director of the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, for her speed presentation.
Uh-oh, thanks. I'm with the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. We have 2 rivers, not just one. We're double the fun. And our purpose is to protect our waters. And we do that through education and engagement programming for healthy rivers. And our area of concern is sort of just south of the Neponset River, just north of the Jones River. We cover 12 communities, the 2 different rivers, headwaters in Duxbury for the South River, and actually this is one of the headwaters to the North River. Our top 3 issues, dams that prevent fish passage, water withdrawals or drying up our streams, that's the Third Herring Brook there, and stormwater pollution, you can see emitting from that storm drain. Not probably surprising, given all the talks that we've heard today. We're not unlike anybody else in watershed problems. So the dams that fragment our rivers, we have about 65 that we know of, blocking fish passage for migration, and as a coastal watershed, obviously river herring are a big focus of ours, as well as brook trout. We have several cold water fisheries. We have removed 2 of the 65, but I think we're getting exponentially faster, I hope. Water withdrawals are drying up our streams in many places where water supplies were co-located with our streams. And we've been working to reduce summertime water demands through a regional educational program called Water Smart. For stormwater pollution, our goal is to reduce the bacteria in our main stems to allow for year-round shellfishing, and we do that through education, monitoring, and support for our communities through improving their stormwater systems. This timing thing is tough. I don't like it. I like to be in control. So the Estuary Explorers Program is a program that we have a boat, which I would highly advise anyone who has a watershed to think about getting, to bring people to your watershed, and this one's focused on getting young people out there and exploring, being, introduction to marine sciences. It's a really great way to engage their families and the community. We also have a very successful school program in the 5th grades in 10 of our communities. Over 2,500 students go through this program, and 350 parent volunteers participate with us every year. We've been doing this since 2008. This is a fabulous way to engage the community. Citizen science and monitoring. We monitor for bacteria. We are the sole monitoring body for the last 20 years. For bacteria in our waters. Herring counts, salt marsh sentinels, new program to sort of monitor the salt marsh with dock owners who live on the salt marshes. Here's the removal of 2 dams that were recently taken out on the Third Herring Brook, opening up about 8 miles of habitat for river herring restoration. Again, timing. Beautiful picture, look at the pretty, yeah. So what we really want to do in our strategic plan is set some serious goals for us to double the numbers of people we educate and engage, and you can just see from here, this is our work towards that. We're really investing in social media, our website, increasing our visibility. We also are getting in, we just hired a full-time educator to be able to go in and do middle and high school programming. So we live in suburban Boston. People who live in suburban Boston are family-oriented. They're all about their kids. So part of what we're doing is getting to them through their children. What makes our watershed special and unique? When the watershed was formed in the 1970s, when the association was formed in 1970, it became the first designated scenic river and only scenic designated river in the state of Massachusetts. It also, both the North and South, are federally designated national natural landmarks. And this is just a picture to show you what can happen from forethought. The people who thought about saving this river really did a great job. You can see where we've retained all of the vegetation along our river corridor because of that scenic protective order. So, thinking ahead matters, and that's the result of it. It's really a pretty pristine water body. Anybody been on it? All right, good. I think we're stuck.
Are we stuck?
I might have screwed up Sarah's timing on
I
the...
tried to check it.
You tried to check, but... She emailed me at 10:30 last night about this. Since she was checking. So, like everybody else here, we depend on the donations and kindness of strangers. So join us today, and your money is actually tripled because we have a very generous matching donor who will match twice any donations to us. So, thank you.
I know, there were a couple pictures of me in Alex's presentation, but I noted a distinct lack of me in yours. I'm behind all the science, so I'm sorry. All right, next we have Jones River Watershed Association.
Ready, Lee? If you haven't seen the pattern yet, we're moving down the coast.
Yes. That was on purpose.
Okay. Good afternoon. We are the Jones River Landing Watershed Association, and this is where we are based. This is a map, and we're to the right here, and we are associated with and built around the Silver Lake, which you can see here is the largest river that feeds into the bay, Cape Cod Bay. These are the top 3 issues concerning Jones River health, diversion, river restoration, climate impact, education, and management. This is on this graph here. First of all, you see a photograph of the damage from a recent drought where 5 million mussels died. This is a recent photo of the dam at Elm Street, which we're in the process of removing, and this year, in the summer, that's going to go. And we have been working on that for quite a while. Here is the Plymouth nuclear site, and we're grateful for the work going on to shut this down. But in the meantime, we're going to change some of the siting to make it safer. This is some of the activity that we are doing, and we have young people both in our workshop, which inside is our boat shop, and we continue to have a lot of activities there. This is our most recent project, the Drew Heritage House Restoration Project. And this is a before picture and the current picture right now. And this boat was the first steamer that was built there. This is some of our science monitoring programs that are going on. And of course, this is a symbol of what started us, this Brockton Dam. These are some of the projects, the citizen science monitoring that we do, river herring, the perch, American eels. These are some of the things that we do and have been doing for over 13 years. This is MIPA site visit. Again, this is our river ladder at the Elm Street Dam, which is in the process of being removed, and we've raised over $1 million for this. Some of our recent successes: the Elm Street Dam permits and funding. We have that in hand. The fish ladder is coming to Brockton this spring, and Entergy is closing, and we are very excited about these ongoing programs that we have. This photo here is from the last season's flooding, and at our location. And you can see the impact, continuing impact of that. This is where we are. These are overview shots from Silver Lake down the river to where the restoration conditions are showing the results of all the work we've been doing. We are the Jones River Watershed Association. We are inviting you and others to join us to continue the great work that we have been involved with there, along with many of you here, and we've been in operation over 30 years.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to keep moving down the coast. We're going to jog a little bit inland and hear from the Six Ponds Improvement Association.
All right, thank you. We are not a watershed area. We are simply 6 ponds. Most of them are in the Agawam watershed area, so it's slightly different for us. I'd like to say I think that there are 11 or 12, I counted, people from 6 ponds here today, which shows you the type of exciting group that we have. I really mean that they would all come out for something like this. These are the 6 ponds. They're right off of Route 3 at Exit 3 in Plymouth. Most of you know Pine Hills on the other side. We're the opposite side of the highway. And it's an exciting area. As I say, it's sort of the top with the drainage away from it. It was started in 1951 by an exciting group of both local and summer people. I love it. All the ladies were Mrs. Everett so-and-so. They're all done by their husbands' names. I am sure that times have changed a little bit since then. And they set up a bunch of purposes which still today really guide us in the work that we do. And we do a lot of advocating for a better community. We are, in fact, basically a neighborhood community more than anything else. This is a picture of every 4th of July. We get together, for instance, and just celebrate the 4th of July in the woods with a simple presentation. And that's the sort of organization that we are. Here's a flag raising, and then we do some simple ceremony. We do a lot on the ponds. This is a group of kids learning how to sail. We are very much advocates of sailing rather than running around in motorboats and doing that type of thing. We've had a sailing organization on Long Pond that started, I believe, in the 20s, if I remember correctly. These are the 3 related issues that we work on very definitely. We're most concerned with residential and commercial growth all around, municipal water needs, cultural eutrophication, if I pronounce that correctly. I had to learn the word. Neighborhood development. Look at that. That was pine forest 20 years ago. That was pine barrens, and look at it now. We have Pine Hills, we have Red Brook right adjoining us, and all of that traffic going through our neighborhood. So you can just imagine the types of pressure that occur on our neighborhood. They, of course, create things like, runoff, sewage, detergents, fertilizers, stormwaters, all of those issues that we all know are bad. They all flow into our ponds, and our ponds are extremely clean and very proud of being clean, so we try and control that. We monitor every time, and a good picture of Lois. Hello, Lois, how are you? Yes, we do water monitoring twice a year, and we have been for a surprisingly long number of years. We were one of the first to really start that in the area and really follow it, so that we run up with this type of diagram that we all do, and we try and keep it independent so that we really know what is going on year to year in our ponds. And that includes some of the bad things and some of the good things too. We are lucky that our ponds are still relatively safe, and I think that's because of the efforts. One of the things we watch out for, obviously, was mentioned by the Jones River Group, is the nuclear plant closing. If there was ever a tragedy in that closing, we would never be able to go back to our area again for generations. We are also very concerned with fire prevention. This is a picture of 1901 after the Mass Road in Plymouth got burned out by a fire. It would be devastating if it happened again. Henrietta, thank you for that picture. We also do local things that are, this is just picking up trash along the road. Can you imagine we do that twice a year, and that's just the sort of pickup that we get on our local roads, which are becoming worse because we're becoming the through roads for some of those developments that we have. So these are the types of issues that we pick up, but we do represent a small area. We love our area because it's an absolutely pristine, lovely place. Most of us have been there for generations, and we're very proud of being the Six Ponds Association. And I think that's about it.
Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna stay in Plymouth with also some Bourne and go to the Herring Ponds Watershed Association, which is my home watershed where I live, even though I work up in the north and south. I know you like facts about me, so.
Some pretty tough acts to follow here, but I'll do my best. I'm Ramona Krogman. I'm from the Herring Ponds Watershed Association. I'm joined here today by two of our other board members, and we're happy to have this opportunity to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do and what's important to us. This is a map of our watershed. It has 4,500 acres. It also includes 11 ponds. I think some of the people in our watershed can only name 2 of those, or maybe 1. But we have quite an area. We have 1,800 homes in our area, which is part of our challenge. Our biggest priority issues are silt and nutrient runoff and remediation. And also we're under continued residential development pressures, which we've heard a lot about today as well. And we need our citizens and the people that live on the pond and enjoy it to become more concerned and more aware of what the ponds mean and how they fit into the bigger picture. In terms of silt and nutrient runoff, we've had some pond shore clearing. People don't realize that the view that they're obtaining by cutting down the forest is actually impacting the pond they're looking at. We have fertilizer runoff issues and some aging septic systems that are also a challenge for us. Residential development pressures, the property values and the property pricing in Plymouth is lower than some other communities that have good access to Boston. That makes us more in demand. We've been dealing with sand and gravel, which has got a high demand, and that brings its own challenges. How do you handle that as a watershed? And our people that live on the ponds are not completely educated in the situation they're living in. They don't really understand the cycle of water. They don't understand how that pond they run their boats on the weekend fits into a bigger picture. We do monitoring runoff remediation by doing sampling. We have data that helps us work with the town of Plymouth on remediation projects. We've done 2 of those, including a water garden as part of one. We also do a lot of water sampling, which involves our volunteers and our members. We do outreach and advocacy. We've been blessed with some people who are excellent writers and very creative, and have created a group of documents that we share with the community. We'll also go and participate in any kind of planning commission meetings and stay very involved in the politics of the area as well. We encourage our members to be citizen scientists. We're just starting our herring count at Sandy Pond Road Bridge. We have a member that organizes bird walks. He's excellent. And we've been involved with milkweed planting and monarch monitoring. In addition to those programs, we do a lot of pond water sampling, which we've heard a lot of the groups are doing that same thing. We've also been involved in a well water isotope project sampling, and we've had 2 charter school interns join us, which has been a real delight. They bring a fresh point of view, and they learn a lot, and we learn a lot from them. We use social media, Facebook, try and stay out there, keep people involved, encourage them to participate in bird reports and backyard bird counts. Some of our successes recently have been 2 remediation projects where between matching funds and grant money, we've managed to do $250,000 apiece on those, which helps wash off water. We've heard a lot about hardscaping and how the water moves too quickly into the pond. We've had screech owl and bluebird house building as well. Our strategic goals are to involve more youth. We need the youngsters to get involved and get interested. Expand committee participation and protect more land. That's always been a real important thing for this particular association. What makes us special is we're an all-volunteer association. We have a very dedicated 13-member board of directors and 8 standing committees. We are stewards of an area that's of critical importance. It's 4,500 acres of some rare coastal pine barrens, and it needs to be preserved. And we encourage you to join us, and that's how, and now can I breathe again?
Thank you. So I'd like to welcome the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. Heather.
Thank you. I'm Heather Rockwell. I'm from the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. We're down on Cape Cod. Our mission is to restore and preserve clean water in the town of Barnstable. Town of Barnstable is about 76 square miles, and within our town we have 4 watersheds. Barnstable Harbor up to the north flows into Cape Cod Bay, and then we have 3 south-facing watersheds. 3 Bays, Centerville, and Lewis Bay that all flow down into Nantucket Sound. 3 Bays is the 3rd most compromised estuary on Cape Cod, so it is not in good shape, and we do a lot of our work on that particular watershed. The top 3 issues for us include nutrient overload, in particular nitrogen, our sole source aquifer on the Cape, and we're concerned with the quantity there and what's flowing into the aquifer through the groundwater, and raising public awareness. Down below there you can see one of our algal blooms in the summer. That's one of the coelatus ones, again caused by nutrient overload. And though nitrogen and phosphorus are both important, we do focus a lot on nitrogen. 80% of the nitrogen, in particular in the 3 Bays watershed, comes from the traditional Title V septic systems that aren't removing enough of the nitrogen. About 10% stormwater and 10% fertilizer is where the rest of our nitrogen is coming from. We have a sole source aquifer on the Cape that supplies all of the water to all of the towns on Cape Cod. In particular, one of the things we're looking at in the town of Barnstable, our population triples in the summer. So we're a little concerned about the quantity of water and the supply there. Public awareness, like some of the other groups have already spoken about, there seems to be a lack of understanding about the critical water quality issues that we have in the town, and we're really trying to get the message out, get people to advocate, turn up, vote, show up at town meetings. So that's one of the things we're really working on. We do a lot of community outreach. We have 4 signature events every year. We have a paddle race where we get people out on the water in kayaks and paddle boards. We work with a local brewery on a 5K, 10K race because you need clean water to make great beer. We have a golf challenge, and we also use an oyster festival to highlight the importance of shellfish with improving water quality. Following on that, we built an upweller last year on Hyannis Harbor in a really visible area. We raised 50,000 oysters from seed, took those oysters and planted them then in some of the shellfish areas in the town of Barnstable. So again, trying to have a demonstration project showing how important shellfish are for improving water quality. We have a lot of citizen science opportunities. We're out working with UMass, Dartmouth, SMass doing estuary sampling in the summer. We're also part of the state's MIMIC program, looking for marine invasive species at various sites throughout the town of Barnstable. We have the annual herring count starting this Monday, April 1st. We do that in the Marston's Mills River at the Mill Pond and Middle Pond fish ladders. We're also out throughout the year taking stream flow monitoring, measurements along the Marston's Mills River. Oops, slight pause there. And then we have 2 sites that focus on freshwater sampling. We're part of the PALS program. We monitor 31 ponds and lakes in the town of Barnstable for that annual snapshot event. That's also with UMass Dartmouth, SMass. And we work with the local high school, Barnstable High School Environmental Club. We get the students outside using sampling equipment and learning how to take measurements. Some of our recent successes on the left-hand side here, you can see a picture of what we call Dead Neck Sampson's Island. It's a barrier island that we co-own and manage with Mass Audubon. We just completed phase 1 of dredging. What was great was we did a lot of beach nourishment and have some new shorebird habitat there. Our goals going forward, in particular, we're really focusing on how do we mitigate, get nitrogen out of our waters. So we're hoping to pilot some innovative technologies and expand some of our aquaculture projects. The diagram there shows you some of the ideas that we have in mind to get that going. What makes our watershed special and unique, like a lot of you, we have some wonderful habitats, a diverse array from cranberry bogs up at the headwaters, lakes and streams, down to our bays and barrier islands. Lots of opportunities to get out on the water and recreate, and again, help us as well with doing our work. How to join: sign up to receive emails, follow us on social media, come out and get involved in one of our citizen science projects, and become a supporter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we have one more organization, Save the Bay. Save the Bay, Narragansett Bay. Who's going to be... Anyone? No, she's coming up. So as we learned, and we'll probably learn, I won't say it, but a lot of the Narragansett Bay watershed is in Massachusetts. So. Yeah.
Thanks everyone, I'm Kate McPherson. I'm the Narragansett Bay Riverkeeper. This is a wonderful shot of the Bay Center in Providence. We have 3 locations. We have one location down in Westerly at Little Narragansett Bay, and we have a aquarium in Newport where we interact with visitors all the time. Here is a picture of our watershed, and as you can see, it's quite large. 60% of the watershed actually occurs in Massachusetts, so we're right up at the top near the headwaters of the Taunton River watershed, where I focus a lot of my advocacy work. Blackstone River, Taunton River, Patuxent River are 3 main water bodies that contribute to the bay. One of our major goals at Save the Bay is improving water quality. So we look at things like wastewater treatment, nitrogen limits, reducing stormwater pollution, and reducing nutrient loads through non-point sources. We also focus a lot on protecting habitats and wildlife. This is a picture of my colleague, Wenley Ferguson, whom many of you may know. She's doing large salt marsh adaptation projects on the south coast of Rhode Island, doing layers of deposition of dredge material on top of that marsh to give the marsh some place to go with sea level rise. We also do a lot of advocacy work with local governments. We look at freshwater wetland regulations and try to make them as strong as they can possibly be. We field complaints from people who live in the watershed and try and get them to the right public officials so that their complaints are actually dealt with. That aquarium that I mentioned earlier down in Newport, we interact with thousands of visitors every year. We have a great touch tank. Children and adults can take a look at the critters that we have, and we collect those critters from Narragansett Bay on our educational trawls. Which brings me to Bay Camp. We have Bay Camp for a wide variety of kids ages from kindergarten all the way up to high school. If you have a high school student who's thinking about a career in the environment, we can show them what that career might look like to help inform their future decisions. We also interact with people via Lighthouse Tours. I've heard our Lighthouse Tour is the best because we've got a big stamp and there's a booklet, and people get really into lighthouses in Narragansett Bay, and they want to make sure that they get their stamp. So we've got a really, really good one. We offer half-day tours and full-day tours, leaving out of Newport and Providence. We also do seal tours and nature cruises, and I learned recently the best time of year to see seals in Narragansett Bay is actually April. They come into the bay, they congregate, and then they get ready to head north. So we have a lot of immature harbor seals in Narragansett Bay right now. It's a great time to go see them. We interact with thousands of kids, and actually, since I don't work in the education department, yeah, no, I got it. I just want to say, 1,248 school programs were provided last year, and over 10,000 students received marine science education. I think that's amazing. We also engage in volunteers. These volunteers are planting salt marsh grasses at one of our salt marsh restorations. So that's freshly deposited sand that was dredged from the breachway. And then in order to keep that sand from moving about in the blowing wind, you got to get it rooted. We also do a tremendous amount of beach cleanups. We participate in the International Coastal Cleanup. We actually weigh all of the trash that gets collected. Our volunteers actually will tally whether or not they picked up soda cans or little pieces of plastic or cigarette butts, so that we have data on what we're actually collecting, and that data is really valuable to help inform policy. If you are interested in becoming a member, we've got a table in the back. We've got membership applications. You get all sorts of discounts, and you help save Narragansett Bay, which is in much better shape than it was 50 years ago, thanks to, in part to support from all of our supporters. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much. All right, can we get a round of applause for our 7 presenters? They all did a fantastic job with that. All right, so now we are scheduled for a break. Oh, and a map of our member organizations. So there you go, there we are, Southeastern. Clap for everybody. There we all are. Thank you for watching the Watershed Action Alliance's 2019 conference, Water, New England's Next Big Challenge. We hope that you've been able to learn something that you can take home with you to your local community and help implement change to help protect and preserve our waters for years to come.